Imagine this for a second. A president sending troops right into your town. Maybe your governor agrees, maybe they don't. Could that actually happen here? And what's stopping it? Yeah, and look, this isn't just some abstract thought experiment. There were headlines, back in August 2025 that really stirred things up. We saw these intense discussions about the president maybe taking direct control of D.C.'s police, even sending in the National Guard without, explicit local agreement. And some commentary, like from Matthew Iglesias over at Slow Boring, raised serious flags. They were suggesting, that it might just be for presidential propaganda purposes.
Right, optics over substance, perhaps.
Exactly, and that it could, maybe ironically, make crime worse, even though D.C.'s crime trends were actually looking better in 2025.
Which just highlights this bigger tension, doesn't it?
It really does. It throws a spotlight on these many surprising limits on presidential power and how states are, actively pushing back.
We're seeing all sorts of things, blue states plotting, as some sources put it, against potential federal actions.
Yeah. And also states passing actual laws, like defend the guard legislation.
Yeah, it's this fundamental tension, federal authority versus state sovereignty. It feels like it's at a real critical point right now.
So today, that's our deep dive. Presidential power, its limits constitutional, statutory especially around using the military domestically.
And we'll get into federalism, that core idea, and how states are pushing back against what they see as federal overreach.
We got a good stack of sources, Brennan Center, American Constitution Society analyses.
That federalism in crisis report from the Heritage Foundation, which is pretty comprehensive.
Right, plus legislative testimony from Kansas. And that recent commentary from Slow Boring. And even a Reddit thread on the blue state plotting.
A real mix.
Our mission, then, pull out the key insights from all this, help you understand the system's guardrails, why federalism matters, and, what happens when those guardrails get challenged. Okay, let's start right at the foundation. There's this bedrock idea in America, keeping the military separate from civilian police work. Why is that separation so crucial?
Well, it really comes down to protecting liberty. The main law here is the Posse Comitatus Act. It's from 1878.
Pretty old, then.
It is, but it's not just some dusty statute. It basically forbids the U.S. military, the Army and Air Force specifically, from acting as law enforcement within the U.S.
Okay.
And it reflects this really deep-seated American tradition, a real skepticism about military involvement in civilian affairs. It's seen as a potential danger to liberty. A fundamental check, really.
So it's not just about who does what job. It's baked into the structure to protect our freedoms.
Precisely. And if you zoom out, it connects directly to the Constitution's idea of federalism, the 10th Amendment.
Remind us.
It basically says any powers the Constitution doesn't give to the federal government or forbid the states from having are kept by the states or by the people.
Right, the division of powers.
Exactly. And that division is critical. It stops Washington from getting too powerful, keeps government accountable locally, lets states try different things. As Diane Katz from Heritage put it, federal overreach risks perverting America's constitutional framework.
Okay, so that's the rule. Military stays out of policing. But there are always exceptions, aren't there? When can a president send in troops domestically? Bypassing Posse Comitatus.
Right. The main exception is the Insurrection Act. It's actually a collection of statutes, 10 U.S. Code, sections 251 through 255.
The Insurrection Act, okay.
Yes. But, and this is key, it's not a blank check. The power comes with very specific conditions. It's not unlimited authority.
What are those conditions?
Okay, first is Section 251. Think of this as the state asks for help clause. The president can send troops if a state's legislature or its governor requests federal aid because of an insurrection they can't handle.
So state consent is needed there.
Absolutely. That's the least controversial way. We saw it used in Detroit 67 when the governor asked, or LA in 92 after the governor's request. Collaboration, basically.
Yeah. Well.
Then you have Section 252. This one allows the president to act unilaterally without a state request.
Oh, okay.
But only to enforce federal laws or suppress a rebellion if unlawful obstructions make it impossible to enforce those federal laws through normal court proceedings.
So, if someone was blocking federal courts from operating.
Historically, that's kind of how it's been interpreted narrowly. It's usually about direct resistance to the federal government itself, not just general unrest.
Okay, makes sense. And the last one.
Section 253. This one's got two parts. First part is about protecting constitutional rights. If violence is depriving people in a state of their rights, and the state authorities can't or won't protect them.
Like during desegregation.
Exactly. Eisenhower at Little Rock, Kennedy in Mississippi and Alabama, classic examples. The second part, though, allows deployment to deal with obstruction of U.S. laws or justice. And yeah, some sources call that part bafflingly broad.
Bafflingly broad. That sounds concerning. So even with that broad language, the idea wasn't to give the president unlimited power.
That's the big debate, isn't it? I mean, the language is broad in places, but legal scholars often point out that a huge rewrite of the law back in 1956 wasn't actually meant to expand the president's power.
Interesting.
And what's really critical is that Congress in 2008 actually repealed an expansion that had been added just 2 years earlier. They specifically said just restoring public order by itself is not enough reason to invoke the act.
So Congress pushed back on a broader interpretation.
They did. And groups like the American Constitution Society argue pretty strongly there's no general public disorder exception, letting a president send troops against protesters if the state objects, unless it's tied directly to enforcing federal court orders or civil rights. You know the saying, Congress doesn't hide elephants in mouse holes. They don't usually create massive new powers with vague little phrases. It suggests the intent wasn't for unlimited discretion.
Right. So posse comitatus is the rule. Insurrection Act is the narrow exception. How does the National Guard fit into all this? They seem local, but the president can call them up.
Yeah, the Guard is fascinating. They kind of wear 2 hats, sometimes 3, actually.
Okay.
When they're on state active duty, it's purely state control. Governor's in charge. Simple.
Got it.
When they wear their Title X hat, they're fully federalized. They become part of the U.S. Army or Air Force. Then posse comitatus does apply to them, just like active duty troops.
Okay, federalized means federal rules apply.
Right. But then there's the middle ground, Title 32. This is kind of a hybrid status. They're doing a federal mission, maybe getting federal money for it. But, and this is the absolute key, they remain under the command and control of their state governor.
That sounds really important. State command and control.
It's critical. Because they're still under state control in Title 32, they are not considered federalized for posse comitatus purposes. So they can actually participate in civilian law enforcement if the governor directs.
So does that mean governors can just say no if the president asks for their guard under Title 32?
They absolutely can, and they have. In 2020, remember, 4 governors refused requests from the Trump administration to send their guard units to D.C. under Title 32.
Wow. Okay, so that's a real check.
It's a significant check. And trying to stretch the definition of other duty in the law to cover just any mission the president wants, well, that arguably goes against how Congress usually legislates. Again, no elephants in mouse holes.
Right.
Plus, there's a big constitutional issue. Sending one state's guard unfederalized into another state without that second state's permission, that raises serious questions about state sovereignty.
Okay, so this whole interplay, federal versus state, it's clearly not just about the military. This concept of federalism, this power balance, how is it holding up overall? Are things getting strained?
Well, according to some analyses like that Heritage Foundation Federalism in Crisis report, there's definitely growing concern. They talk about federal encroachment on state and local affairs and argue it's perverting America's constitutional framework.
Perverting the framework. Strong words. What's the evidence they point to?
Several things. First, federal mandates. Orders from Washington telling states what to do.
Often without the money to do it. Right.
Oh.
Unfunded mandates.
Exactly. Between 2006 and 2019, they counted 457 of these mandates, often unfunded or underfunded. Former Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam, for example, said his state got only like 8% of the cash needed for Clean Water Act stuff.
Ouch. That forces states to use their own money for federal priorities.
Precisely. Second, look at grants and aid. Federal money given to states. The number of grant programs exploded from about 130 in 1960 to over 1,200 by 2018. And in 2019, that federal aid was over $720 billion. That made up almost 31% of all state spending.
So states rely heavily on that money.
They do. But that money often comes with strings attached, conditions. It lets Washington steer state policies, making states almost like agents of federal redistribution, as the report puts it, rather than independent policymakers.
The money shifting towards individuals, too.
Yeah, the share of aid going directly to individuals rather than general state programs shot up from about 25% in 1978 to over 76% by 2019. Federal influence is reaching deeper.
Okay, mandates, grants, What else?
Third is preemption. That's where Congress just passes a law that overrides or wipes out state laws in a certain area.
Sometimes businesses push for that, right?
Yeah.
For uniform rules across states.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It can simplify things for interstate commerce. But the downside, critics argue, is it kills policy competition among states. You lose that laboratories of democracy effect where states try different solutions, and it arguably pushes policymaking further away from local citizens.
So this federal power grab, as some call it,
Yeah.
it sounds like it has real costs for how government works, for accountability.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just abstract. It directly impacts how responsive government is. This centralization of power, the sources argue, undermines political accountability, policy innovation, and civic participation.
How so? Accountability, for instance.
Well, if Washington mandates a program or ties funding to it and it doesn't work well locally, who do citizens blame? The feds who ordered it, the state that had to implement it, maybe poorly funded. It gets murky.
Yeah, I can see that. Hard to hold anyone responsible.
Right. And it stifles innovation because states have less freedom to try their own approaches. Civic participation can suffer too if people feel like the real decisions are being made far away in D.C., not locally where they can have more direct input. It weakens that sense of self-governance.
So with all these pressures, this feeling that state power is shrinking, how are states actually fighting back? What are they doing to protect their autonomy?
We're seeing some really interesting legislative pushback. Take the Defend the Guard bills popping up in various states.
Right, we mentioned those earlier.
Right.
What's the goal there?
Dan McKnight from Bring Our Troops Home testified in Kansas about their bill, SB 38, back in January 2025. He said it's meant to close a loophole and restore constitutional order.
A loophole regarding.
Regarding using the National Guard for foreign wars without a formal declaration of war from Congress, they want to reassert that constitutional requirement.
Because the Guard has been used overseas a lot without formal declarations.
Significantly, McKnight pointed out Obama sending forces to Syria in 2013, even after Congress said no to authorization. And by 2024, National Guard members made up over half, 58% of U.S. forces in some foreign conflict zones.
Wow, 58%.
Yeah. So these states are saying, wait a minute, our Guard belongs to the state, serving the community and the nation, but Congress needs to declare war if they're going to be sent into extended foreign combat.
Okay, so that's one form of resistance focused on foreign deployments. But states are also gearing up for fights closer to home, aren't they? That plotting you mentioned.
That's right. It's not just about overseas. That Reddit discussion from late 2024, talking about blue states plotting to thwart Trump, shows a different kind of preparation.
What kinds of strategies were they discussing?
Pretty proactive stuff.
Right.
Things like using constant litigation and delay tactics. One comment was literally, be like red states, litigate constantly, tie it all up in the courts.
Using the courts as a shield.
Exactly. Also, talk of outright defiance, like maybe states could refuse to pay the feds the tax funds if Washington withholds money. That's pretty radical.
The fiscal standoff, yeah.
Forming regional alliances, too, maybe for disaster response if they think federal aid might be cut off or used politically.
Preparing for the feds to pull back support.
Sort of. And critically, focusing on ensuring the loyalty of their state's National Guard, making sure the Guard answers to the governor, not the president, in a domestic dispute.
Wow. So what does this all tell you? This kind of organized strategic resistance coming from states, red and blue, using different tactics.
Well, it really underscores this idea of federalism in crisis. It shows that states across the political spectrum are willing to invoke states' rights, a term with a complicated history, obviously, but they're using it now to protect their citizens or their policy choices from what they see as federal overreach.
So it's not just one party's issue.
Not at all. It seems to be a structural reaction to perceived centralization of power. And some sources worry this could lead towards a bifurcation of the United States, almost like different countries operating under different rules on the same land. That could really increase conflict between states.
That's a sobering thought. Okay, so let's wrap this up. This deep dive really highlights this constant tension, doesn't it, between Washington's reach and the state's autonomy.
Absolutely. We saw presidential power to use troops at home is limited posse comitatus, the Insurrection Act's conditions reflecting that core value of civilian control, often needing state agreement.
Right, but we also saw how federal actions, mandates, grants with strings, preemption, are seen by many sources as a real crisis for federalism, potentially undermining local government.
And in response, states are getting strategic. Defend the Guard laws, proactive plotting, litigation. They're actively pushing back to reclaim sovereignty and protect their interests.
So here's the final thought to leave you with.
Mm.
As these constitutional lines get tested again and again, and states push harder for independence, how does this change the basic nature of the U.S.? Does this rebalancing act ultimately make liberty stronger by keeping power local? Or could it, maybe, lead us toward a more divided, fractured nation down the road? Something to definitely keep thinking about.